Hey YouTube, so I'm aware of the fact that the lighting in here is less than appropriate. Just a moment. Close your. There we go. Okay, good enough. I just had a thought, and I also know this camera's shit, so like it's gonna be all like laggy as you watch it, but that's all. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like a dispatch from the edge of the universe. Anyways, I was just watching a Terence McKenna video. He's talking about seeing aliens, aliens that are way more alien than any alien UFO like fanatic could ever imagine. In the sense that they're only visible via transdimensional traveling through psychedelic drugs, right? Where your brain chemistry is tweaked in such a way that new things become visible. In the sense that life is like a radio dial, and your brain chemistry is like a radio dial, right? So there's so much more to reality in terms of ways that we can't perceive than the ones that we can. Like we can perceive the light wave, we can perceive particles and mass and all this stuff, but we like our brains are tuned to that. But as soon as you take like a drug, say acid or something, acid denies your brain serotonin. It puts in like I think it works for like it denies serotonin and puts something else kind of like serotonin. Can't remember exactly how it works. I'm not a fucking chemist. Anyways, the thing is like that tweaks your brain chemistry and that's turning the knob, right? That's turning the knob so you see differently. Your brain is now wired to see a slightly different part of that kaleidoscopic spectrum of reality. And yeah, so as you tweak with it in more appropriate doses with things like DMT and psilocybin mushrooms and stuff, Amanita muscaria, then you start to see like old fabled beings such as elves and stuff, and these are shared experiences on different drugs. And I can't say I've actually seen any of those. I've never actually hallucinated anything that quite intense on any drug ever. Like the most psychedelic experience I ever had personally was off baked weed and cupcakes, where there's way too much weed put in about 4 or 5 cupcakes, and it was like a never-ending panic attack, basically. And I had out about experiences on the walk home. It was intense, and I have now tried DMT. Of course, the thing is, and this is very personal to actually announce on YouTube, but I'm on an antidepressant which actually dulls the effects of most drugs. It increases the effects of alcohol, potentiates alcohol, but it decreases the effects of things like mushrooms. And I'm not sure what it does with the acid. I haven't tried acid on it since. And it decreases massively the effects of like things like dimethyltryptamine. And anyways, I tried DMT. I think I did it wrong, and I sprinkled on top of a bit of weed and smoked it with a friend. And I just felt very depersonalized and very derealized the next day. I just had bad anxiety the whole day, like, and I had my first panic attack in a few months. And that was probably because I was naive and idiotic in mixing it with the antidepressants and stuff without doing intense research on it, which I should have. Of course, I'm in a stage where I'm trying drugs for different reasons, so I can get different points of view on reality and stuff in an alchemical format where I'm like combining things. Of course, some things aren't meant to be combined, and that's the whole thing. It's trial and error, so I kind of have got to accept when I do make a mistake, and hope that one mistake isn't going to be a huge risk for my mental health, which it hasn't been. In fact, sorry, my hair. I'm just obsessed with how my hair looks. That's one of my neurotic tendencies is my hair. Yeah, so if I ever did public speaking, it'd be pretty funny. Anyways, uh, yeah, so as I was saying, the thought I had watching Terence McKenna was he was giving this statement on how members of the UFO community are just like people who said like, oh, we just so happen to be alone in a truck in a dark, dark like driveway or dark pathway or something in the forest, and then we got abducted, and this happened and that happened. It was crazy. I had, probes up my asshole and all this kind of stuff, and that makes sense. But he also does make the correct statement in the sense that most of these people aren't people you would even send to the grocery store to get your milk. Like they're that messed up and weird, and just like, I find that to be judgmental on one part, but like it's true in another. There actually are people who are just off their freaking rocker with shit like that, and to give them, I don't know, you can't really make any for sure judgments on anything like that. I mean, who knows? I think everything is probably correct in some way, shape, or form. But he's saying like UFOs and aliens are actually much more mysterious than we'd like to admit, in the sense that, God damn it, here, in the sense that yeah, they are like they're trans-dimensional beings, and you do see them when you're high on things, high on psychedelics. And the way he talks about it, like he knows, and this is what I'd like to address. He knows that as soon as somebody starts talking about this kind of stuff, like there's definitely a chasm opens in the conversation Where like say if I started really getting into it, like I don't know. Terence McKenna I take with a grain of salt just as much as anybody else, but Jesus, is he interesting to listen to? It's like reading a book that you're like, okay, like I can entertain the possibility in my head and the likelihood that at least facets of his philosophy and his studies were correct. I don't know to what degree, but the mythos around it and the mystery it adds to life in a general sense, it just fucking it thrills me. The thing is, I don't know. Like, I don't know how true it is. I'm not sure if he's just a genius that convinced himself of his own fictions. But he's definitely, definitely interesting. But the thing is, if I actually held those same convictions as Terence McKenna, if I actually went that far, there would be a complete chasm in the conversation. Where if I was stating that you see aliens when you're high and all this kind of stuff, like I can imagine going home to my parents and doing that and stating that to my dad, say, my brother, and like whether I would be able to sense it in their mind, they would know. They would know. They would think like I just crossed like a fucking. I crossed a line in talking about that, and not that they wouldn't listen. Like they value my opinion and they know I'm not stupid, but they would definitely start wondering if I'm just starting to get off my rocker, if I'm losing it, right? Because that's a complete prejudice that has been established by the scientific objectivist skepticism theory, right? Which is completely conditioned in the same way that the fundamentalist Christian is conditioned to deny science because of certain things, right? Like they need to tear through that with evidence, with different factors, and obviously they're going to lose now because of the overwhelming force of scientific objectivism and materialism in the world today. But it's just, I think it's kind of unfair. I think we need to start deconstructing these prejudices, and it doesn't say that's not to say like you should just be accepting things willy nilly, and say this guy's right and this guy's like wrong, or just saying like, oh, okay, obviously he's right when he says there's like there's aliens when you take drugs, right? Like who knows, it could be just a schizophrenic rambling or hallucinations of some sort. I don't know, but I'm saying like we've got to start letting go of those prejudices and actually letting the wisdom of people who are mentally unstable, like kind of penetrate us so we can learn from them. I mean, the whole reason we just call them mentally unstable and insane and stuff is because we're mentally and like we're psychologically uncomfortable with even going there in our heads. Like there is a huge amount of value to the psychotic experience, I think. Now I'm pretty sure I've had like periphery psychotic experiences, but never actually had a full-on psychotic schizophrenic experience, and I hope I never do. To be honest, it's a huge fear of mine. But but there's value in it. There's value in the same in the same way that there's a value in psychedelic drugs and the experience you get from that. I mean, you get like a sort of a synthetic psychotic experience in drugs. So like we're just uncomfortable. We're just completely uncomfortable with the idea that sobriety is just an opinion, and there literally is no such thing as sobriety, because no matter what, you're chemically altered in your brain. Every time you breathe, every time you eat, every time whatever, right? There's a certain form of the brain, in a sense, that we can decide to call sobriety. But I'm pretty sure you can be sober. I mean, sobriety would mean a lack of chemicals in a sense, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't like to say I'm not a scientific reductionist in saying that we're all just chemical equations, because we're not. And chemistry is literally just a name that we've decided to label like things we've picked apart in our brain and put in relation to the whole, right? You can't have that part without the whole, or the whole without the part, not in the functioning way that it works right now, right? And to say there's literally something called serotonin is the same as saying there's literally something called a god. Now, figuratively, in what points to the greater all, like the incomprehensibility of the giant universe that we'll never get to understand completely, there is a god, a finger pointing at the moon, and you stare at the finger to look at the moon, but don't get stuck on the finger, because that's what the doctrines are, that's what the ideas are, that's what the labels are. It's literally just fingers pointing at the moon, so you look at the greater reality yourself. That's what God is, the incomprehensible unknowingness of the entirety of existence. And serotonin, figuratively speaking, is something we've decided, and as a tool, it does exist as a figurative tool of language and linguistics. Serotonin does exist, but it's only figuratively that it exists as a symbolization of something that we've decided to separate from the whole, and put in relation to it, so we can measure it and do all this different stuff and possibly even manipulate it and whatnot, right? But it doesn't literally exist. Neither does a God literally exist. There's no man in the clouds, and there's nothing, like, there's no serotonin in my head. There's just something I use my mouth to kind of affect, changes. I'm trying to think of a fucking not retarded way to describe this. But, okay, I talk serotonin, and that comes out of my mouth and affects the sound waves and changes like whole particle constructs within the area and travels a certain distance, and that comes back to my ears to make a feedback loop You know, that comes back to my ear. So I'll get serotonin, serotonin. I think of serotonin. I think of the symbol of serotonin. But I'm not actually like, nobody's ever seen serotonin cause them to love somebody, and nobody's ever seen any of these chemicals actually do these things as they do them, because they're just names, right? And their fingers pointing at the moon, which in the end really just point to the great spiritual incomprehensibility of life, the great beauty, the great mystery that we're all wafting and wading through and completely ignorant of. But anyways, yeah, the point was that I wanted to bring up was that I can see myself eventually potentially being convinced of things like this, like aliens and psilocybin and stuff. I mean, I just have to experiment with drugs more to understand what that would mean for me, technically. But I just feel like we have to start deconstructing our prejudices, because the person who, like Terence McKenna, stating things like this is just as right as like the scientific objectivist stating that there's, that light travels faster than, you know, I don't know, like light travels a certain distance and at a certain amount of time, and that stars are dead in the distance. It's just as fucking credible, I think, right? Like, and it's even more credible in the sense that it's an immediate experience that is repeatable, as Terence McKenna says. So I don't know, just my thought for the day.